Hello and welcome. So today we're going to crack the code on one of the weirdest, most interesting puzzles in the English language, plurals. I mean, why are some so easy and others, well, why are they so strange? Let's get into it.
You've heard this one before, right? It's the classic question that just perfectly sums up the beautiful chaos of English. And the reason behind it, which seems so random, is exactly what we're going to figure out. So stick around, because the answer is honestly way more fascinating than you might think.
All right, before we jump into all the really weird stuff, we've got to cover one basic idea, noun number. It sounds kind of technical, but it's super simple. It's just the rule that tells us if we're talking about one thing, that's the singular, or more than one, the plural. That's it. Now, here's the good news. Most of the time, making a noun plural is incredibly simple. These are the rules that'll work for you like 90% of the time. So let's get these down first.
Here it is. This is the absolute workhorse of English plurals. For almost every noun you can think of, all you got to do is tack an S right on the end. It's clean, it's simple, and it just works.
And you see this everywhere, right? Book becomes books, car becomes cars. If all of English was this easy, well, this would be a very short video.
Okay, now for a second, try to say boxes out loud, or dishes. It's just awkward, isn't it? And that's why we have our next rule. For any word that ends in what you could call a hissing sound, like S, S, CH, X, or Z, we add ES, just to make it pronounceable. You can actually hear why we do this. That little E creates a whole extra syllable. Buses, boxes. It's all about making the language just, flow a little better. All right, so we've got the basics down. Now we can get into the really cool stuff, the pattern breakers. This is where the rules get a little more specific, and honestly a lot more interesting. So here's a really common one. You take a word like city. You just look at the letter right before that Y. In this case, it's a T, which is a consonant. So boom, you drop the Y and you add IES. But what about a word like boy or toy? See, in those words, the Y comes right after a vowel, so the rule doesn't apply. You just add a simple S. It really goes to show you that the letter before the Y is the one that matters. Here's another change that's all about how it sounds. For a lot of words, that sharp F sound at the end kind of softens into a V sound for the plural. Think about leaf turning into leaves. But notice how I said many words, and not all of them. Because of course, this is English, and English absolutely loves its exceptions. So while wolf becomes wolves, roof just becomes roofs. There's no secret code for this one. Some of these you really just have to learn as you go. So why? Why so many weird exceptions? Are they just mistakes? No, not at all. They are basically linguistic fossils. They're ghosts left over from the older languages that mashed together to make English, like Old English and Latin and Greek. This is the big aha moment. And here we are. This is where we finally find our geese. This is a classic leftover from Old English. Hundreds of years ago, a super common way to make something plural was just to change the vowel sound right in the middle of the word. And that old pattern still survives today in some of our most common words. Then you've got the words that just don't change at all. One deer, two deer. One sheep, a whole field of sheep. You see this a lot with animal names, especially ones that were historically hunted or farmed. English is a huge borrower of words from other languages. And when it took words from Latin and Greek, a lot of the time it stole their plural forms too. That's why we have all these academic or scientific-sounding plurals that seem to be playing by a whole different set of rules. And, just to keep things interesting, some words end with an S but are actually singular. You'd never say, the news are on, right? It's always, the news is on. We see this a lot with subjects you'd study in school. Okay, so we've seen the rules, we've seen the exceptions, but why does any of this really matter? Well, because getting the noun right has a huge impact on the rest of the sentence. And this is probably the most important reason to get plurals right. It's called subject-verb agreement. Basically, the number of your noun, whether it's singular or plural, actually changes the verb you have to use with it. The dog barks, but the dogs bark. Once you get the plural right, the rest of the sentence just clicks into place. So what about stuff you can't really count? I mean, you can't have 2 waters or 3 rices. We call these uncountable nouns, and they're easy because they just don't have a plural form. A really common mistake people make is saying informations. Nope, it's always just information, no matter how much you have. Okay, let's do a super quick recap of everything. We've got our regular S plurals, we have the ES for those hissing sounds, we've got the Y to IEs and the F to Vs rules, and then we have all the cool historical leftovers, the vowel swappers, the ones that don't change at all, and the ones we borrowed from other languages.
So, from the simple rules to these ghosts of the past, the story of English plurals is really the story of the language itself. And that brings up one last thought. Language never ever stops changing. For instance, more and more people say octopuses instead of the old Latin plural octopi. It makes you wonder, right? What totally normal words today are going to become the weird irregular plurals that people in the future have to memorize? Thanks for joining me.